I mean, definitely the empowerment thing. It's something that we preach to all of our staff. Like they have carte blanche to send appropriate gesture to any table, and we challenge them to get creative with it and not just be like, here's an extra dish you didn't order or don't need and you probably don't want, but now you feel guilted into eat it because we sent it to you. Like being really thoughtful with it rather than just it being like a reflex.
I mean, honestly, it happens really frequently just because we talk about it all the time. And as Mike said, we try to make it personal and intuitive as opposed to just doing the same thing for everybody. I think one just really simple gesture that I like is if somebody's visiting Maine for the first time. And, because we're really about having a sense of place here and making sure that, everything kind of works together and that makes sense for being where we are. So sending like a little welcome to Maine, 2 little oysters. We have broiled oysters on the menu with like a chili butter and breadcrumbs. So it's a small amount of food, so it doesn't impact somebody's game plan. I hate when I'm too full for my entree. I'm really annoyed by that sometimes. So something that's not going to, be too filling, but it's more of just being thoughtful and saying, hey, I heard that you guys are visiting Maine for the first time. Here's a little taste of Maine.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, owners of Wayside Tavern, Michael and Siobhán Sindoni. My lady, my gentleman, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I guess so. We're going to fake it till we make it.
I am psyched to be here. You are here because Alex White called you out to be a guest on the show. She was amazing. Super impressive lady. As we're recording this, her episode hasn't gone live yet, so you haven't gotten a chance to listen to it. But if she's saying amazing things about the two of you, then I know this is going to be good. No pressure. I can't wait to kind of dive in deeper. But real quick, give me a snapshot. What is your business today?
Can we say something really quick about Alex?
Yes,
amazing
please.
Thing about her. We go to a restaurant every season, and at the end of every meal, she'll come over to the table. She'd already been by several times. She'd be like, "No bullshit. What do I need to fix? What's not good? Like, don't sugarcoat it. Tell me exactly what you didn't like, and what do you think we should do?"
Yeah.
And I think that so many operators don't do that
because I get mad at Mike when he tells the truth.
Yeah, well, she asks.
But I think that's great context for what we're here to do today, which is to get open, to share, get vulnerable. I think we compare ourselves too much. There's a lot of ego in this industry, and that ego, we're afraid to get real. And I think that fear of getting real, fear of getting vulnerable, fear of showing the truth gets us in trouble. And I'm here to kind of hopefully encourage people to say that if we want to continue to be independent operators, the only way we're going to do it is together.
Yep.
And I mean, I think she's a shining example of that. I think you're a shining example of that, being willing to give her honest criticism. And I can't wait to get into it.
Cool.
Yeah. So snapshot, Wayside Tavern. What are we working with? Is it one location?
One location. We've been open for almost 3.5 years. Small restaurant, 42 seats, including the bar, in the west end of Portland. So it's a true neighborhood restaurant.
It's beautiful in here, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Takeout or dine-in only?
Dine-in, essentially, we'll do takeout if people call, but we do not advertise it. We don't have online ordering. We don't do delivery. If
What
someone
percentage
calls,
of takeout would you say?
very small.
Yeah.
Like
It
5%?
seems like they come in waves. Like on a given night, we'll have 0 or 5.
5%.
What's that?
Is it raining out?
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit more.
exactly. And it's usually
we
people
do a
who've
burger
been
on
here. And
Sunday, Monday, so that's a bigger night for that. But it's pretty minimal.
Catering?
No, like offshoot sometimes if asked and we can do it, we have, but nothing set up. Lots of celebratory, like large parties. We'll do events and buyouts and things like that in
We're in
addition
a
to
special
normal
room
service.
here.
Yeah, so this room is a perfect example. We can seat up to 12 people for a completely private, very like intimate dinner. We get a lot of people doing a small city hall wedding and just wanting to come and have a nice dinner with their family. So we do a lot of events like that in addition to our normal service.
So basically, like 99% dine-in is like
Yeah.
your mix,
Yep.
your marketing mix. Okay, here's a question. I warned you it was coming. What is your total gross?
so this year, I have to pull my notes.
You can answer that however you want.
No, I'd be totally transparent. So this year, Year to date, we are at about 1.3.
That's awesome.
It's pretty small, but
3 years in, 42 seats.
Yeah.
That's really great. Congratulations.
Let's give you the whole rundown. Our first full year, 22, we did
Nothing.
891. Then last year we did 1.16. So we're on track to do about 1.4.
Wow. Wait, so the first year was 8 point. Say it again.
891,000.
Second year was
1.16.
and this year you're on track for 1.4.
1.4.
That's awesome. Congratulations. I can't wait to get into it. So before we dive into who you are and how you got to where you are today, let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
I think something we always try to keep in mind is, we're hospitality first always. So I think we'll probably talk a lot about Danny Meyer in this. Will come up a lot. So one of his quotes is, business, just like life, is all about how you make people feel. And it's that simple and that hard.
Yes. Yeah. Like a lot of things in life, it's that simple and that hard. So why did you choose that quote today?
I think that's really one of our core values. And when we first met, Danny Meyer and reading Setting the Table, I read it in my early 20s, just out of college, in my first real serious restaurant where we met. And we've kind of gone on, made our own way, but that was a real foundation for our sense of hospitality and a lot of the values that we started with.
What are you feeling, Mike? You want to reflect on that? You're going to piggyback on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as a young chef, you think I made this great dish and people should just love it. And then if it doesn't resonate, the guest is just wrong. It's just, we take a total opposite approach to that. And we're trying to provide an experience that is not about us, but it's about what are people going to leave the building feeling great about and want to come back.
I love that. Danny Meyer, too, that book, Setting the Table, if you haven't listened to it, there's just so many nuggets in there. But this is a great way to start the show. Where does it make sense to start sharing your story today? So I looked into Siobhán's background. Her name was on my calendar, so I thought I was getting a one-on-one, but we're getting both of you, so I'm stoked about that. I love it when I can get both, because we're stronger together. But when you crossed paths in 2009, is that what you said?
2009, yep. Yeah.
So that was early in your career because you graduated college around 2009 too?
I graduated college in 2009. Okay. I moved to D.C., got a job in a restaurant about the month that I moved there, and that's when we met. Okay.
And I picked up earlier, Mike, off air that you are a little older.
Yeah.
So were you in the industry for a few years before she came on ship?
Yeah. So I went to culinary school right out of high school. And then after that, I got an opportunity to cook in Italy for a few months.
Nice.
Made my way to the West Coast, and I eventually started working at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
And since then, I've literally been working with somebody I met there up until we opened Wayside.
Half Moon Bay, where is that?
It's it's on the coast just south of San Francisco.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So you graduated in when?
2002.
Okay, so you're about 7 years in the industry before crossing paths.
Yep.
With Siobhán. And would you say most of your growth was at the Ritz-Carlton?
Absolutely, yeah.
Who were you when you went in? Who were you when you came out?
When I went in, I'd had a few fine dining experiences, but pretty old school, asshole chefs, and there wasn't really much culture. It was very fear-based kitchens and not much opportunity for growth. Just, you're just like when I was in Italy, all I did was cut vegetables. I had 14 hours a day. I was just cutting vegetables. And then eventually I got my way into this fine dining French restaurant in San Francisco before I went to the Ritz, and worked with a very typical classic old school French chef who would scream and yell and all that. And then when I got to the Ritz, I got to experience this culture that I didn't even know that anything like that existed. I mean, just the way they do line up twice a day, and the worldwide, everyone is talking about the same topics. The training that goes into it, the fact that the general manager of the property was at my training. I was a line cook, and he's explaining that it was very hard. They hire slowly, and your start date might be 3 months after you're hired or something like that. And I might not remember this exactly because it was so long ago, but he said something like even in 2005 that it cost them $21,000 for every hire.
Wow.
So they're very
$21,000 for every hire. I had Hurt Schultze on the show like 5 years ago. Do you know that name?
It sounds familiar.
I think he was like the CEO of Ritz-Carlton.
Okay.
Like part of like the first one, helped scale that. And I mean, the amount of energy that they put into culture in that organization and creating a ritual around their values and their standards, like the 26 values, I think is what it was.
The 20 basics.
The 20 basics.
Yeah.
And they, beginning every day, they go through, they pick one and they talk about how it happened. They make an example of it.
Yep.
And then they cycle through all 20 of them until they get to the end and they go back to the first one. So
every day and the whole company's talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And, obviously, like you said, there's 20 of them, but the one that really stood out to me, and I think that, Danny Myers talked about it too, is this notion of empowerment where any employee, housekeeping, dishwasher, all the way up, is empowered to, I think there's a dollar value, but they don't really care, but you're allowed to go to extremes to create a good guest experience. And there's a famous story about a housekeeper that flew to Hawaii to give someone a laptop that they had left that they needed for a presentation and didn't spend the night, just got right back on a plane. And obviously the Ritz paid for it, but like those kinds of extreme things that they became famous for, and it builds loyalty. Obviously, it's expensive to stay at the Ritz, and it's they're kind of dated, and they're not. There's nothing, I don't think, super
cool.
Yeah, they're not hip, but they've got their core like customers that will never leave because they take it to that extreme. And I think that Danny Meyer sort of piggybacked on that, and so that was a really like formative years for me.
Well, look at what Will Guardera talks about in Unreasonable Hospitality. I think the cool thing about like 11 Madison Park and the Ritz-Carlton is that you're serving the top 1% of the 1%. And like, there's literally like no ceiling on like what you can do to stand out, which just like blows the roof off creativity.
Yeah.
So you get to hear about these crazy stories. Like, can we all fly our server to Hawaii to deliver a laptop? No. But if we can, at that level, if we can pay the $1,000 to go do that, that millionaire is going to be coming back every time they come to New York City. And like, that's a lot of money, lifetime value guest, right?
Yeah. And I think it's taking that and applying it to sometimes the most special gesture is free.
Right.
So how do we don't have $1 million, we don't have $5,000 to send someone to Hawaii tomorrow if someone forgot their laptop, but how can we take that same idea and apply it to what we can actually do?
Right. The time and energy in just taking the time to literally, what other resources do we have? Money is a resource. Time's also a resource. Attention is also a resource. So are you intentional with your time and your energy and your resources to like see people?
Yeah.
Right. And that's really all you're doing is you're just seeing people.
Yeah.
So you went to the Ritz-Carlton for the first time. This is the first time that you really have this experience of like a shift in culture.
Yeah.
How did you grow?
Well, in addition to that, the kitchen was also very challenging, and I was surrounded by extreme badasses. And no one that was in that kitchen didn't want to be the best. And so we all really pushed each other. And like I said, I still work with these people today. Like Siobhán's going to Miami to work on a project with a chef that I met there in 2005.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's still like that network is still, I talk to half the people I worked with there.
Got it. How many years were you there?
Only 2.
Only 2 years.
Yep.
So how much time was between when you left and you met up with Siobhán in 2009?
I think that I did a couple small things in between, but it was maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like basically 2005, 2007.
Yeah, that's when I was at the Ritz, and then the restaurant we worked at in DC was opened by an all Ritz team. I worked with every single. It was in DC where I think it was because some of them worked for the Ritz corporate team, but they had come from the property that I worked on, and so our entire opening management team was people I'd worked with in California.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool. So, give me like one example of something you pull from culture, like a culture element from working at the Ritz that you apply today, and then I want to hear something that's like more like business, like systems processes that you leverage today. But start with culture.
I mean, definitely the empowerment thing. It's something that we preach to all of our staff. Like they have carte blanche to send appropriate gesture to any table, and we challenge them to get creative with it and not just be like, here's an extra dish you didn't order or don't need and you probably don't want, but now you feel guilted into eat it because we sent it to you. Like being really thoughtful with it rather than just it being like a reflex.
Can you give me an example of a time like somebody on your team just did this and you're like, yes, every time?
I mean, honestly, it happens really frequently just because we talk about it all the time. And as Mike said, we try to make it personal and intuitive as opposed to just doing the same thing for everybody. I think one just really simple gesture that I like is if somebody's visiting Maine for the first time. And, because we're really about having a sense of place here and making sure that, everything kind of works together and that makes sense for being where we are. So sending like a little welcome to Maine, 2 little oysters. We have broiled oysters on the menu with like a chili butter and breadcrumbs. So it's a small amount of food, so it doesn't impact somebody's game plan. I hate when I'm too full for my entree. I'm really annoyed by that sometimes. So something that's not going to, be too filling, but it's more of just being thoughtful and saying, hey, I heard that you guys are visiting Maine for the first time. Here's a little taste of Maine.
I love that. You said you're constantly talking about it. Just like at the Ritz, they're constantly talking about those 20, what is it called? The standards of excellence?
The basics.
Basics.
I don't know if they still do it. I think it's become more of a Marriott brand at this point, but
But that idea of whatever your values are or whatever your basics are, whatever your standards are, you have to reinforce them almost daily.
Yeah.
So like when you're teaching people this, like how do you teach people that this standard, this behavior? Like what is that like?
So
that
we
coaching
religiously start pre-shift every day at 4:00, like not 4:01, 4:00. We always try to, we talk about product that we're offering that day. We do a lot of product education. We try to teach a lot about, wine and different food product components that we use. And we talk a lot about hospitality. And I think especially when we have new employees on the team, it's people might be coming in here and this concept is totally foreign to them. You've never worked in a restaurant that did this. And so you kind of have to like start from ground zero and then really getting into like, well, what might be the best? And we use Resi here, so we'll have notes on who's coming in that night. We go through, all of our reservations for the evening. We always talk about, our regulars that are coming in. Who are they? What their preferences are, things like that. So we talk a little bit about the actual things that we can do at pre-shift, but then in the moment, we're just always saying like, oh, hey, remember that's this person. They don't drink or something like that. So let's do a little like chocolate mousse at the end. So, and I think a lot of it is constantly talking about it so that it's really becomes ingrained in the culture because, I can't just do it all myself. We have to almost like scale hospitality in a way. Right. And everyone's got to really understand, and it's got to become part of the culture.
Yes. So the words that I like to echo, I picked up from Mario Del Perro from Mendocino's Farms, and he talked. When we talk about culture, we talk about the basics, right? Mission, vision, core values. Those things are we talk a lot about, but we never talk about rituals and language. And I think really like how do you echo the core values, the standards, the vision? You have to have rituals where they're daily or weekly or annual things. Yeah. Like any culture that's ritualistic that recurs seasonally or annually, and you have to like have like a thing that happens. So for you guys, it's your pre-meal like ritual. And like, here's what happens at every ritual. It's like going to mass if you're Catholic. Like, it's the same thing every time. But when you have that rhythm and like you have to like literally create these rituals to get the culture to absorb. You can't just say, here we are. It's in a manual someplace. Learn it.
Oh, no.
Like,
and you see how that goes wrong so often.
Right.
You could put the best manual together possible, but if you're not holding someone's hand and taking them through page by page and explaining the things that are in the manual doesn't mean anything.
Right. And like, I'm using Catholic because I am Catholic, and I know like you go to
Yes,
CCD, you know, like
Well,
you go through training to be Catholic, and like they teach you like the culture.
Yeah.
And then they resurface it every week on Sunday.
Mike went
you
to
know?
Catholic school.
Right. So, I mean, so that's a great example of culture, right? So, I mean, again, the Ritz-Carlton, like, does it get more like attention to detail? Also, you know, yes, with the culture and the customer, but also behind the scenes.
Yeah.
What did you learn about operations?
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing and recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So while I was there was a chef change about a third of the way into my tenure. And both of them very, you know, I mean, the first chef, he was the chef at Campton Place before Danielle Hume from 11 Madison Park. And then second chef worked for Eric Siebold and Thomas Keller. So it's very like classic California fine dining. But the shift, it was the first place I used grams. And
I didn't know that.
And now I use them even at home.
Why is that so important?
Because precision, attention to detail, and you know, and also if you can't rely on people's intuition when it comes to a recipe, because we're, you know, essentially a restaurant kitchen needs to be like a factory. Like you need to be able to produce the same thing over and over again as efficiently as possible with as little variation as possible. So you need to get as like granular and exact on your recipes as possible. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's probably the biggest lasting effect. And then there's some, you know, I'm also learning there's some other things that like, there was still a little bit of that old school, like we're going to do it the hard way just because it's hard.
So oftentimes the hard way is the right way, but there is a reason why it's hard.
Yeah.
You know, but
Like use an example like that might seem like a cutting corner now.
I remember one sous chef giving me shit because I made my whipped cream for my station with the KitchenAid instead of doing it by hand. But I'm like, but if I use the machine, then I can do something else while it's doing it. So I don't think that that's lazy. I think I'm just being more efficient. But things like that, where it's like, you should do it the hard way just because.
So
but
okay, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say that was a big transitionary period from like, you know, only being around these old school chefs to like now we're weighing everything. We're learning why you do that. We are, you know, using sous vide, which I was very against in the beginning.
Why were you against it?
Because so the hardest station was the meat station, and you had to pan roast everything to order, and you had to do all these different temps, and you had to work your way up from garde manger to veg to fish, whatever. And I had just finished the meat station when they brought in the sous vide, and now anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Because it's already done. And I mean, obviously it was immature of me because we use it here, because why wouldn't I? But it was a big shift. It was like, well, you're not really learning to cook, but at the same time, you're increasing the chances that it's going to be made properly every time.
Right.
Which,
or not wasting and
yeah, exactly.
Like consistency. So if I'm hearing you right, when you said like I think for the longest time there was like this almost like this ego or like this ability to say that if we're doing it the hard way, it shows that we are talented and skilled. And yes, maybe we can use that in the marketing effort to say what you're paying for is like an authentic experience. But what's that balance of authenticity and cost of labor, cost of ingredients if you're not doing it right? Like where do you find that balance of like leveraging technology if the product is just as good, if not better? Like, how do you find that balance between spending the money to do it right or being efficient in making money?
Correct. Yeah. And now I've come like full circle, and
Right.
like, because I'm the one paying for it.
Right.
So
But also, I think that a lot of your coming to full circle was what's actually going to impact the guest
Right.
at the end of all of this.
No,
Are they
exactly.
even going to notice that something was whipped by hand or whipped by a machine? No.
Right.
And putting your efforts in what's actually going to impact or be noticed by a guest.
Right. And, I think a lot of times this is why like I push back at award culture, like I'm not singling out any award, but I think over time this award culture like lifts up the hard things because that's what's cool or sexy or trendy. And then everybody in the industry is like, well, if we want to get an award, we have to do this, but at what
Yeah.
cost? And now we have all these restaurants trying to win awards and nobody's profitable because they're more
and a
interested
lot
about the
closing.
vanity.
It's like,
Yeah.
cool.
Right. So, that's why I push back a lot is because I think it's like, we got to find that balance of like fiscal responsibility and service and like, is hospitality how cool you do something or is it how you make someone feel?
yeah, exactly.
How
And
you
part
make
of that
someone
is
feel. You're not concerned at all with being cool.
Right.
no.
So I think the other thing too, going back to Graham's, I think when people hear that, especially chefs, they're thinking, well, you want to be consistent. So when the guest comes back the second time,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. But why else is it important to measure to the gram?
I think that it's important that if you do everything with like a high level of attention to detail, it carries over into things that might not matter, but in the aggregate, it adds up to a noticeable effect
Right.
on everything you do in the front and back of house.
Yeah. And costing. So
Sure.
maybe the ingredient one chef is a little more heavy handed with is the most expensive ingredient. So like, is your margin going to be the same consistently? Like,
Yeah, and that really comes into play with like portioning of proteins, especially like we have halibut on the menu. We always have halibut on the menu, and it's definitely our highest food cost item. And so you want to be as exact as possible.
And our top seller.
right.
So that really is where like the skill comes in. I mean, there's only a couple people that touch it in this building, but if one person's cutting it at 200 grams, one person's cutting it at 160, you're ripping off the guest if it's too small, but also like it's already like 45-50% food cost. Like we have to hit 180 grams on that portion.
Right. Yeah. It's also how you control your like actual versus theoretical costs.
Right.
Like you measure to the gram, you know exactly where every element, every like literally element that's on your menu is going, what it costs and where it's going. And like, it seems like a lot of work to do that, but why is it worth it?
Because it creates a mentality that everything matters.
Yeah.
And we really try to, take that from every aspect. And even like people make fun of me because the way I stab the tickets, but like, I think if you're sitting at the bar and you see that the chef's station is like nice and neat and everything's in order, like okay, they take their shit seriously
Yeah.
here.
It's like the low road experience of like the subconscious of like, wow, even like the tickets look pretty,
Yeah, and I think sometimes a guest can't maybe put their finger on exactly what it is that made them feel a certain way, but it's like, as Mike said, the aggregate of all of these little things that you're just like, wow, that was really nice. I don't really know why, but I just left there feeling good.
So I'm going to put your timeline story on pause right now to pivot towards Siobhán. So you graduate 09. Sorry. Yeah,
Yes,
was it?
09.
09.
Yep.
You have a background in sociology and psychology.
Yes.
How did you end up in the
Major in
restaurant industry?
psychology.
Major in psychology. For the record, when I was doing my research, I audibly said out loud, I'm going to have fun talking to her because I think there's always a connection. I think people who focus on psychology and sociology do really well in the restaurant industry because it's so much about human behavior and just understanding people. And I just geek out on that stuff. So, but how did you go from that path? Like, what was your vision for yourself in college?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was trying to figure it out the whole time, trying to say, like, you know, what job would I have with this degree? And I realized that I don't actually want to have a job directly in the field of psychology. When I graduated, it was 2009. The economy was pretty terrible, so I just jumped right back into restaurants.
Were you working in restaurants throughout college?
I was working in a cafe, yeah.
Got it.
Yep, all the 3 last years of college, I was working full-time in that cafe there, and I went to UMass Amherst, a little cute cafe in downtown. And, yeah, I think I should have known, since I could never really figure out what exactly I wanted to do, but I was still kind of that generation of, like, you get a college degree and you move forward with that.
All
and
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, and so when I moved to D.C., I just kind of on a whim, I had a roommate at the time that was moving down to D.C., and I was like, I could use a change. I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life, so I got working in the restaurant where I met Mike, and it was definitely more like upscale, fine dining touches. As Mike said, it was opened by all Ritz-Carlton management, so when I just loved it. You know, I just loved it so much, and met Mike, and he really introduced me to that whole world of restaurants and chefs and wine. And I think studying something your whole life, I was kind of like, after, you know, a bit of working in the restaurant, I wanted to specialize in something. So that's when I really started studying wine. Yeah, and I just never looked back. It was kind of that turning point for me by saying, like, okay, I don't need to figure out anymore what I want to do. And it's funny looking back now. I mean, I apply a degree or an interest in psychology in every single day and managing people and dealing with, and, you know, with our guests. But so I always say, you know, it served me. I was always a huge interest of mine. It still is. I think, you know, but I didn't actually want to work in that field. Right.
I mean, what I'm curious about is, like, through that lens, this education that you have, like, how do you think you approach the industry different than somebody without that lens?
I think the biggest thing is managing people. Not everyone's going to be successful, managed the same way. I think you really need to take time to see, like, how somebody is going to be successful by different approaches to managing them. I'd say that's the biggest thing. I mean, it's really, I started out in management really young, was in my 22, 23, and almost everyone I was managing were older than me, sometimes twice my age. And so I think meeting, you know, just having people feel like I was on their side and getting through to people, and you're not going to get through to everyone the exact same way.
Right. Where do you fall on the personality assessments at
I'm
work?
like smack in the middle.
Okay, so you're ambivert.
I don't know.
So extrovert, introvert, ambivert is like somebody who has they like the social experience, but they also need to retreat on occasion to like regroup,
recharge.
Whereas introvert is like, just keep the people away from me.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the middle. I don't know which way I might lean. I'd say I don't need as much recharging as maybe Mike does, but I have also met true extroverts, and I'm like, that is absolutely not me.
Right. Well, I mean, what I was curious about in that question was like taking the time, and I know this isn't in reach for a lot of independent operators because it costs money to buy the personality assessments where you hire people and you make them take a personality assessment.
We did it with our last company.
What product did you use? Do you remember who did that?
I don't remember. I was the same one as Michelle Obama, though. I remember.
Oh, really? Yeah. So what was the company you were with prior to this?
So we did it with Make Ready.
Okay.
We worked with them.
How did that, how did taking the time, well, I think first, just for your own personal good, like it's for the person to be more self-aware. And they say
Yeah.
self-awareness is the peak of emotional intelligence, right? So if you can give somebody that self-awareness and help them on this journey towards emotional intelligence, that alone I think is worth it. But
Yeah.
then like if you're managing them and you understand like how they prefer to be managed and how like, I'm drawing a blank right now, and I hope it comes to me before the end of this conversation. I had the CEO of this company that they do this. It's killing me. Ed Doherty is the, why can't I think of the name? It will come to me eventually. But just like taking the time to, one, become self-aware, and two, to become aware of all the people that you're surrounding yourself with. It just, how did that affect you at this time at Made? Sorry, what was it called?
At Make Ready?
Make Ready.
It was really interesting to take the test and interesting to see what some of my, colleagues got as well. I think Mike's was, I forget what it was called, but it was like really comically spot on.
I'm a promoter. Isn't that ironic?
I wish we could remember what it was. To be honest, I was already really secure, I think, in my management style at that point, because this was only, 5 years ago that I would have taken it. And it was definitely interesting. I don't know if I can think of an example of how I adjusted my approach because of it, though.
Okay. But back to that question around psychology and like managing your team and managing your guests, like any like lesson that you could just draw on or provide?
I think that, again, everyone has to be maybe managed slightly differently just to get the most out of them. But at the same time, being very fair, that's something that's really important to me, is always making sure that I'm being fair across the board. I can't stand, and I've worked with managers that you can just see that they're gunning for somebody or they have favorites. And I just don't like that. I think everyone deserves a really fair shot. And I think, one way systems-wise that we try to do that is really communicate what our expectations are, the same to everybody. Be really transparent in that way so people aren't ever really caught off guard. We're like, well, I didn't know that you wanted me to do it this way. And then, give them, again, back to Danny Meyer, giving them the tools to be able to perform whatever it might be. And then following up and holding people accountable. And I think if you do that fairly to everyone across the board, even if, I don't know, you might tweak your approach a little bit because of personal differences, I think you got to be really fair and transparent with everybody.
I think there's human nature too. I think we gravitate towards certain types of people. Mm-hmm. We tend to flock together, birds of the same feather flock together, and you have to kind of check yourself to make sure you're not playing favorites.
Yeah.
How do you override that tendency, like I think that human nature, when you see yourself doing it? Like, what's that internal narrative for you?
Yeah, I think it's hard because we're all human beings. I think, again, getting back into this management when I was really young, always understanding that there is a professional line in the sand. This is an industry where a lot of people go out and have beers and stuff, and it can get very social and, in other industries might seem kind of unprofessional. Just always checking yourself, making sure that you're staying professional. You're not, you're not having relationship that's, again, there's going to be people that you just kind of get along with.
But it starts with the hiring process. I mean, you do a lot of personality assessment in your interview process.
Yeah.
You're probably not even aware of how it surfaces in your life day to day. I think it's probably one of those.
I don't have the best answer.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at one company that we had dinner with every single even server before we hired them, and my boss was like, if you're not enjoying yourself for 2 hours of a dinner with them, then don't hire them.
Yeah, well, they're guests, but yeah, exactly.
And I try not to make it just be like, well, I think they're funny. It's like, are they going to have the qualities here? Like, my interviews are pretty informal. Sometimes I leave them and I'm like, what did I even ask them? I don't even know their availability. But I'm like, did you show the things that are what I think makes a successful person here at Wayside. And I think the biggest thing is like of true kind of enjoyment of like food and wine and sharing that with people, and just people being kind. Like
Right.
if you're not kind, like we are a very accommodating restaurant. I tell people in an interview, like if you're not nice to old people, or if you can't, like you just shouldn't work here, because it's just a huge part of our culture is to be very accommodating.
Yeah.
And if that's something that, if you enjoy working at a restaurant where you get some sort of power from saying no a lot, then this is just not going to be the right place for you.
I did this whole episode with Ari Weinswag from Zingerman's about dignity. And like, you know how he has those, are you guys fans of Ari Weinswag, Zingerman's? And
We know
and
Zingerman's. I'm not familiar with him though.
So he has these pamphlets that he puts out. He's a writer, and he shares all of his business lessons, and he's like a lapsed anarchist's approach to building a great business, becoming a better leader, leading oneself, building community, or something like that. But he has these pamphlets now, and his latest one was on dignity. And I think to kind of ride into what you're saying, the importance of treating people equally, I think that at the core is what dignity is being treated the way you deserve to be treated, regardless of who you are, what your value or your background is, but just treating people, that's dignity, treating people equally, 100%.
Yeah, and just to backtrack a minute, I think too, I'm very aware of when I have more of a natural compatibility with somebody, and taking that and making an effort in somebody that I might not have as much in common with, being aware of that, and then kind of putting that certain effort into that relationship, asking them how their weekend was. And even if it doesn't come as naturally, being aware of that too.
Right.
I don't need to try as much maybe with this person or this person, but with this person, I want to make sure I'm still available and showing that, interest and care for them.
Right.
And that just has I have to maybe put a bit more effort into that one.
So like that's your value, right?
Yeah.
You're creating a personal ritual around that value to make sure that you're giving people that equal attention.
Yeah.
So it has to happen like at the group level and at the individual level to reinforce your values in your culture. I do want to resurface to go deeper. If you're interested in a personality assessment, I did a deep dive with Ed Doherty, who is a predictive index is what it was called. The one that
that sounds familiar.
predictive
That might be the
index?
same one. Yeah.
Is that the one you guys did?
Well, the promoter sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I know.
If you said the one I was, I might.
Are you a Maverick by any chance? Does that sound familiar?
I don't think
There's a bunch of them, but it's just fun. Like anybody I've ever known who's done a group setting, it reinforces culture and like just like awareness of the people around you. To like when you know how to communicate with somebody, it makes it so much easier. And again, just a self-awareness part of that. But it's called Predictive Index. I've had Ed Doherty on the show a couple times. I also had Ed Doherty and Al Lucas on the show. And Al Lucas is behind a hospitality group in Philadelphia. It's escaping me. I think it's Defined Hospitality. They're doing amazing things. They talk deep about the power of Predictive Index. So, and I had the CEO of Predictive Index on the show. And now let's go to 2009. You guys start like noticing each other. Are you a couple? I'm assuming you're a couple. You're married, right?
We're married.
Yeah.
How long has it, were you working together before you got married?
Before we got married?
We got married in 2015.
Okay. So 6 years before getting married.
Yeah.
So it was probably pretty early within working with each other that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were both young and poor and living in Washington, D.C. So we were like, we should move in together immediately so we can save on rent.
So 2009 was a couple years after you had left the Ritz, right?
Correct.
Were you part of opening this what was it, a hotel?
Yeah, we were both part of the
It was
opening of the
an independent restaurant that the owner investor was, I believe he was the corporate F&B director for the Ritz, and he just recruited the whole team based on his experience with the Ritz. Give a shout out to Wes, my friend, good friend Wes Morton, who Siobhan's going to work with next week. He asked me to be his CDC for a tasting. We had to do a tasting. That went well. We, we opened this place, and it got, it was well received. It got pretty good reviews, but there were a lot of expectations that come from when you have hotel money revenue versus independent restaurant revenue, and the management team was absurdly large. The budget was we didn't even come close to like the projected revenue. You know, I mean, we did, $3.5 million. Like it wasn't like bad, but it was like the expectations were super, super high.
Yeah.
And so, I think we were there for 3 years, something like that. And it's funny enough, someone that I worked with at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay, he had taken a position at the Jewel Hotel in Dallas as the food and beverage director. And at the time, the restaurant there was Charlie Palmer. And he basically just recruited me, and that's how I ended up in Dallas.
Okay. So, but you guys met in D.C.
Yeah, we moved to Dallas
and
together.
you moved down. So you had the opportunity in Dallas, and you went your own way. You guys didn't continue to work with each other.
We
briefly
didn't. Separated
work-wise.
But then, we kind of, how long was that? We kind of worked, we separated for a bit work-wise, and then we came back together, and we worked for the same company, but we were in very different parts of it. And Mike was in the hotel, the Jewel Hotel, and I worked for just their restaurant side. And then I left for about 2 years and worked for a very small independent restaurant, like chef-driven, chef-owned.
Victor?
No, that was called FT33.
Okay.
It was
2007? 15 to 17?
Yes, yeah. It was right after we got married that I started working there. And I had kind of pushed my wine education to the back burner and really wanted to focus on management.
Okay.
I had passed my level 2 quartermasters like pretty young, at 23, and very young in my career.
How many different levels are there?
4.
Okay.
And
Keep
so
going. I'm listening. I'm going to get my coffee because I realized I never brought it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
You made me a coffee and I just left it. Keep going. Listen.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to shift that to the back burner. I felt like I was pretty far ahead in the wine side, and I kind of put my head down and tried to learn as much about, restaurant management as I could. And then I just got a random email one day from the general manager of FT33.
Okay.
Who somebody had, he was looking for someone that could come on to be a floor somm, kind of assistant manager. They were about to open another restaurant. He really needed somebody that could, stay there and
this coffee is delicious, by the way.
Okay. Watch over, FT33 as they were going to be kind of pulled to open this second restaurant. And it had, I think, the best wine program in Dallas for sure, maybe in the state. I mean, it was up there in the state of Texas. The general manager was a guy, Jeff Gregory, who I learned so much from. And yeah, it was a hard 2 years. It was an intense restaurant.
Was this your first time as a GM?
So I wasn't the GM there. No, I was the GM at Victor Tango's before that. So I kind of took a step down in the management side of things, but really to work with one of the best wine programs in the state.
Yeah, I think that's something that people miss. Sometimes you have to take a step back into the left or to the right to get under a higher canopy where you can go sacrifice a few $1,000s a year to pick up a new skill and to tie your personal brand.
Absolutely. It was just the right time for me. I kind of pushed wine to the back burner for long enough, and it just email came at the right time where I said, I was a general manager at the time, and I said, I do want to get back into doing more with wine. Victor Tango's was a really kind of cutting-edge cocktail bar at the time, and we put a really fun, small wine program together, but people were coming there for small plates and cocktails. We had a big industry, fun, late night, no windows. It was just like a fun, real industry place to work. And yeah, busy, big parties. But yeah, people were there for cocktails. And I just kind of had to let it be what it was. I'm never one that's going to try to change a business based off of like what I want it to be. Like Victor Tango's was about cocktails.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was just the right time for me to move in another direction.
Was wine calling to you? Was there an appeal there?
Absolutely. And I mean, it was since I started learning about it in my early 20s when I went through the quartermasters 1 and 2 within 5 weeks of each other because I'm psycho. And I thought I would fail the first time I took the level 2 So I signed up really quickly after I passed the level 1 and ended up passing somehow. Yeah, no, I love it. I love geography. I love cultures. I love wine. So it's like, it's all these things I love in one topic.
The stories or the learning never ends.
Never ends. I love being able to share people's stories too. I think after years of being in the wine industry, I realized that that's one of the most rewarding parts of it is, I've been privileged enough to go and travel, Italy and France and meet a lot of these producers. And then I'm back in Portland, Maine or Dallas or Miami, and I get to share these people's stories with somebody sitting at a table. And that's just really cool. And they need that,
Right. So we got about an hour left together. And I feel like there's so many different directions we can go. I think what's unique is, you've been now married for almost 10 years. Congratulations as business partners for a chunk of that, which is like they say, never go into business with your partner. I think what's unique is doing this with somebody from the beginning to the end, the dreaming together, the visioning together. So like, I'm kind of curious, like when did the first like inkling of like, we want to open a restaurant together come into the picture? Like when was that a part of the story?
COVID definitely contributed to it. It's something that I'd always wanted to do, but Siobhán's much more risk averse than I am. And during COVID, we all went crazy being inside, but I started.
We were only inside for 2 months.
I know. I make it like it was a year, but yeah, I started buying like commercial restaurant equipment and like, there's a big brewery scene here. And oftentimes, because they don't want to hire a chef and everything, that they hire a food truck for the day. So I'm like, why don't we just do something we can go do at the breweries just like for fun, like because we were furloughed and we were only working like 2 days a week or 1 day a week. And so we did that, and that's okay. Now I understand the licensing process. We already had an LLC because Siobhán had done some consulting. And so you learning these things, it's like, it just seemed like a natural next step. But really, if we didn't find this space, we still look at spaces like but this was like the perfect space for us.
Right. I guess what I'm interested in is like the evolution from 2009 to 2021 is when you opened your first spot, right?
Yeah, I would say that during those years, after where we left off at FT33, we began working together again, and we both just kind of kept, like climbing the ladder, if you will. Like, and at that next job, we were both on like a director level, overseeing multiple restaurants and multiple general managers and chefs.
And we did lots of openings.
We did a lot of openings. My focus was, front of house operations, service, wine. Mike was all culinary,
So, great partnership, like marriage and business right there, back of house, front of house. Being able to divide and conquer, I think is huge. No.
Yeah. And I think getting that level of experience, I have to, be that type of person where you feel 110%, appropriate for a job before you would apply to it. And that's kind of how I approach opening a restaurant too. Like, I really did feel like, although as hard as it was, I really do feel like we had the experience to be able to do it. And that's where, going from 2009 to 2021, that was just years of experience and opening a ton of restaurants, learning a lot of lessons on someone else's dime.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of, hotel experience too. I think we just had a really good understanding. And sometimes I think that can keep people from doing it because you almost need to have a little bit of like being naive about how hard it actually is and how little money you're probably going to make.
Yeah.
Ignorance is truly bliss.
Yeah, we didn't have that. So we really knew what we were getting ourselves into.
The last opening we did for another company was it 2020?
Yeah, we opened a restaurant and hotel in July of 2020 in Charleston,
so like
South
peak
Carolina.
Pandemic, yeah. And because of that, the rest of the corporate team wasn't really traveling
because of the pandemic.
And so we were the only ones there. And for better or worse, like we're making all the decisions, whereas normally,
For better.
unfortunately, with these bigger companies, a lot of times decisions are made by committee, and that never leads to
Slow-moving
a great.
ship. Yeah.
It never leads to a great, authentic feeling product because everyone is pitching in, and it just ends up being like this mess. And we were the only ones there, and it went really well. And I think that gave us a lot of confidence. Like, why do we keep doing this for other people?
Well, I think there's something to be said about, to your point, doing it on someone else's dollar and learning the hard things, not putting yourself into a hole. But like, there's one thing running restaurants. Like, it's one thing to be in restaurants, back of house or front of house, learning how to run a successful restaurant. Opening restaurants is a completely different set of skills.
Yeah.
So if you want to open a restaurant, go find a restaurant group that's scaling. Tell them that your goal is to go open restaurants and be a part of that opening team where you go, give it 2 years working one of their restaurants, prove to them that like you are good at what you do, and then go be a trainer and go open restaurants and like learn what that process is like, because if you want to open a restaurant, that skill set is invaluable.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the thing that we didn't have, I mean, there's always going to be situations where you're unprepared for opening your own restaurant. It was like we did work for a big company, so we had a finance department, and we had I've been doing payroll for years and years and years, but when a letter comes in the mail saying you need to deduct this person because they have a child you didn't even know about, and you need to learn the laws, or
Right.
you can't just think you're going to do the things that you're good at or you like. You're responsible for doing everything, and actually you're probably going to do the thing that you're good at and you like a lot less than you think
Right.
you're going to.
That's the whole
So-
premise of the E-myth. The entrepreneurial myth is like, you're good at making pies. I'm going to go open a bakery. And then you realize all the shit that your boss was doing that you had no clue about. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, crap.
Yeah.
Never knew what the controller did. Now I do.
Right. But I mean, that's also what they talk about in 10X is easier than 2X, is getting to that point where you're 10X in your business, because then it's easier because you're not doing half the shit anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
You're able to focus on the 20% or less of things that you're really good at,
Yeah.
and surrounding yourself. So like, it's interesting. We read all these books and we realize, oh, like that's how you do it. And then you're like, but I need resources to do that. So how, like, it sounds like you guys have also learned this, but like when you opened, you had to do everything, right? Were you doing everything?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So your lane prior with Make Ready. Make Ready.
Yeah.
You were basically, your titles were first wine consultant, then you were director of restaurant experience and wine director.
Yes.
And then you were the executive chef,
Culinary director.
director. But you were also opening. So you weren't in the restaurants like running them. You were going out and.
So basically, we would be deployed for openings. We would go, anytime there was a new menu, I would go and do a tasting with the chef.
We'd be deployed if the general manager was getting fired. We'd be deployed if that was mostly.
So like you were
me.
like a utility player, like where
Yeah.
we need you.
Yeah, we'd be deployed if they're like, hey, their service absolutely is terrible. We need you to go spend a month there and, help the team.
Like I'm hesitant to like go deeper into your past because I feel like I want to make sure we're telling your story of where you are today with Wayside, but I feel like there's got to be. So like, let me just ask you guys, like, what do you want to talk about? Like, what do you think you should bring to this table right now in terms of like what got you here?
I think
That's a
what
loaded
we
question.
want to talk. Just what comes to mind is I don't know what's worked for us here in the last 3 years. You know, like what we said at the beginning. You know, making people, how you make people feel. It's simple, but it's hard. You know, I think something that we've done, and you have to have the experience to be able to do this, but I think that we just kind of, through opening kind of in the still COVID times, it was July of 2021, things were weird. We just really stuck to our guns with a lot of things. And I think that's really important. You know, consistency.
Well, having faith that if we go bend over backwards to make sure that everybody leaves happy, that will pay off. And it's like, I was listening to his name, Arlen Smith, that you had on.
Yeah.
You know, when you guys are talking about marketing, like we, I think, feel similarly to you that like the best marketing is just doing the best work. And, you know, if you can get repeat guests and really take great care of them, they're going to tell their friends, and their friends are going to tell their friends, and that has really been like the key to growth for us, because you know we're not in the old port. There's nobody walking around, and we're able to stay busier later in the season every year because we're trying. We put a lot of effort into creating those regulars.
Yeah, it's been the hard, slow approach.
Yeah,
but
that's why they say get 2 years of operating capital, because it might take that long.
Yeah.
to get
I mean,
into
but
the
it
black.
just feels really real and true to us to do it organically like that. You know, every guest, every time. You know, we couldn't afford a PR company when we opened, but we certainly didn't have one, and we never have. We paid a friend to help us with our social media for Instagram.
Right.
And that still has been our only form of marketing. And she took beautiful pictures, but it wasn't, everything was all, this is exactly how the schnitzel's going to look when you come in. This is exactly how the restaurant looks. It's just the fact that, hey, we're here, and this is the food we have when we open at 4 o'clock.
Right.
You know?
Well, let's go back to like 2020. You were in Charleston, July 2020.
Yeah.
Were you living in Portland, Maine at this time?
Barely.
Okay.
Yes.
So you had moved to Maine.
Yeah.
I saw that you were both in Dallas for a long time, up until
7 years.
2019.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you made the move to Maine. When you moved to Maine, like what was going on like in your life where you're like, let's move to Maine?
It was sort of in anticipation of at some point opening a small restaurant. I mean, we'd vacationed here a lot.
Okay.
It's obviously a fantastic
Vacation land.
Yeah, exactly. And there's
Vacation meaning we would spend a weekend here and there just eating.
Yeah.
But both of us
we'd
kind
go to
of from
5
the
restaurants a
Northeast.
day for 3 days and then go back home. But it just seemed like it checked all the boxes for us. And there were a lot of other chefs who had done the same thing and restaurateurs who had done the same thing. And
we wanted to be really smart about it because obviously the opportunities in a huge market like Dallas with people throwing money at you, literally, it's why we probably spent longer than we were there. It's just a cool opportunity after cool opportunity. And, you know, you were really, hard work paid off, you know? And so we wanted to be really smart about moving up here, knowing that it would be harder to find jobs that, you know, were even kind of close to what we were used to in Dallas. And we ended up being able to move up here with Make Ready. So Make Ready took over the Cliff House down in Cape Netick.
Yep.
And
Beautiful property.
yeah,
Beautiful property.
Everyone in the company worked in mostly Dallas or Atlanta. And so we said, hey, what if we are like boots on the ground for Cliff House and you guys move us to Portland, Maine? And they said, okay. We were
Nice.
like, we're moving. We had set on our calendar like 2 years prior, like by this date, we will figure it out and we will move to Portland, Maine.
So you were with Make Ready for 2 years, 19 to 21?
I feel like it was
Like
longer,
that
but yeah, I
thing.
guess.
I consulted for like a solid year, and then
Okay.
I got an official job literally like a week before the world shut down.
Okay.
I would have not gotten that job
Got it.
because most of the company was furloughed.
Got it. So the Cliff House it's a group that buys properties, specifically hotels. and they have restaurants in the hotels. So you were managing like the hospitality side of the hotel.
So
We were specifically on the food and beverage team
Got it.
of Make Ready.
Make Ready. Yeah.
Got it.
So Cliff House is part of Make Ready's portfolio, which is pretty small. They're all boutique hotels. They're all in like medium to small markets.
The Charlestons, the Portlands.
Charleston, Savannah, Nashville, Denver.
Got it.
Dallas is their
and
biggest.
Dallas. Yeah.
Got it.
Savannah.
You mentioned something that I'm tempted to go into where people were throwing money at you.
That might have been a little excessive, but
Well, I mean, I think there was some truth to that period from like maybe like, since like 2007 to like 2020, basically, where retail was just falling away. Like I know you guys weren't associated with the retail, like, or like the traditional, what's the word I'm looking for? Project managers or people that own these properties that like, they're like, oh crap, like I can't put a boutique like retail operation in this space. Like what works in retail space today? Restaurants. So everybody and their mother was like, oh, let's open a restaurant in our space because nothing else works in retail space today but restaurants. So if you were a developer, and you had money behind you, you were literally just like, everybody was getting a restaurant for like this 10-year period because they didn't know what else to do. And if you had money, you could just open a restaurant and give somebody who worked for Thomas Keller some money to go do it for you. Right. Mm-hmm. So like, was that kind of the feeling, or is this more calculated?
it seems like there's always these big, like, beautiful restaurants being open. Dallas is one of those markets where, and it's a market where people dine out a lot. So there is like money to be made in restaurants.
Right.
And there's just seemed, they want it. Dallas kind of gets a reputation for wanting to be LA or Miami, high profile,
right.
Restaurant openings. And so the opportunities, were always there. But we knew we just didn't want to stay there forever. And we just had to kind of pull the plug, even if it was like hard to do that professionally.
Yeah. I mean, we were making great money, and cost of living is very low.
Got a great education.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a great network too.
Got it.
We had great friends, and it was, but we knew we just didn't want to.
But we just kept
fast
saying we
forward
were going to
15
leave
years and still be in Dallas.
So we had to pick a date, and then it just kind of lined up.
I mean, the only reason why that stuck out to me, and I felt tempted to go down this lane, is because I feel like a lot of the issues that the restaurant experience is feeling today is because of that 10-year period where like per capita there was like this boom of restaurants, like unlike any other time before, where there's more restaurants now than ever, and it's just like, of course we're having trouble. We're all there's a restaurant in every corner.
Yeah.
Like we can't, like, restaurants were born out of this place where like every town had like a restaurant, like a public house.
Right.
Like that was where people went.
Yeah.
100 years ago, and like now it's like there's hundreds of restaurants in the town sometimes.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how familiar you are with Portland, but 66,000 people.
It's similar to Portsmouth. Like there's more restaurant seats in that city than there are people who live in that city year round.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of, how are we going to separate ourselves here in Portland? That was a big thing that we thought of when we were opening this place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I skipped ahead. So essentially, we got moved, opportunity to move up here. I was consulting for the company. Mike had a full-time position. And then, prior and during COVID, our roles kind of changed a lot to like more what you would call like task force in the hotel world. Lots of travel. So when you asked, did we live in Charleston? I spent 2020, June through November in Charleston. Came back only a handful of times. So I lived in a hotel for those 5 months.
So by 2020, you had moved to Portsmouth or Portland. Mm-hmm. You're here, but you're still traveling for work, barely living here.
Yeah.
And then 2020 hits, and you're thinking to yourself, let's get a food truck. But how are you doing the food truck if you're traveling on top of that?
We were furloughed for 2 months.
Oh, that's right.
So Mike bought an Alto Sham for our living room and stared cooking roast.
It just kind of evolved into a food truck. It's still the craziest thing to me. I have a brother who was working in restaurants in New York, and he was kind of going through a similar thing where he was out of work. I'm like, you want to do this food truck thing? And we still had we came back to having full-time jobs. So we obviously were very involved with the food truck, but but it definitely didn't pay any bills.
Right.
But it was more just like, oh, this is cool. Like this is
kind of
like
our entry into Portland,
Yeah.
because prior it's like we were working remotely or we were traveling. And I applied to even be like a server at restaurants around Portland, really just to meet people and start. And
You need roots.
Yeah, get into the restaurant community here. And funny enough, we ended up doing that by opening our own place.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like I always say, go someplace where you have roots, or go set roots before trying, because you need the support of your community.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one way to do it that I don't think I've ever heard of, is starting a food truck, just to get out there and to bump up against other operations, learning your local market. So you were working in restaurants and also running a food truck at the same time. And doing the make ready.
Make ready. That was our full-time job at the time.
Yeah.
And we
It's a
were
lot
kind of
going on.
starting the small business.
So the food truck was more of like a hobby. Was it meant to be profitable?
I mean, it was marginally profitable,
Got
like,
it.
and to the extent that I didn't have to keep putting money in it. It paid a salary for, my brother, and we had an hourly front of house person who took orders and got tipped. But it was really just like,
It's like a little mini business.
What was it called?
it was called a roll call.
Roll call.
Yeah, it was just really like I'm not good with a lot of downtime, and so
Right.
I just was going crazy. And but it was a great experience because we worked with a branding company, and again, we'd done this in the past, but always with someone else making the final call. And so we got to do the branding from start to finish, and again, like I said about the licensing and just learning all these things. It's like, all right, now we're even closer to being ready to just finally just like open an actual restaurant.
Yeah. And I think once we saw this space, and we should give you a little background, this is a third restaurant that's been in this space.
Okay.
So the restaurant prior, unfortunately, closed during COVID. And then we saw the space towards the end of the year of 2020 or very beginning of 2021. And I mean, we were, had been to the restaurant that was here previously numerous times. We live only a few blocks away from here. And especially when I was traveling a lot, Mike would come here and have dinner at the bar. And, the food is great. And we love the space. And we never thought at the time, oh, the space will become available and then we can open our restaurant here. And so when it did, and we were like, Mike reached out to the landlord, just, hey, can we come by and check it out? And it's like, well, if we're ever going to do this, like, we're going to do it in this space. Like, everything just felt very right.
Well, I mean, that feeling is so important, and like
Yeah.
it's you have a personal connection to it, and there was a desire there before you even knew it was an option. I'm curious. You said you guys didn't have investors; you did this all yourself. Mm-hmm. If I'm a bank and you're coming to me, I'm like, they're a good bet. Like, with your experience, where you worked, the work you were doing, not just working in restaurants, but you were being paid
Yep.
to go open restaurants. Like, I'm giving you a loan. I'm assuming that's the path you took because you're probably very eligible for it.
Yep. So it's a funny story. Well, I don't know if it's funny, but it's. I agree with everything you just said, but also given that 2 previous restaurants failed here and restaurants are closing left and right, we applied for and were
It's a gamble for a bank at this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's always a gamble to open a restaurant, but it was like the worst time in history.
Nobody knew
Yeah.
what was going to happen.
And so we got an SBA loan approval, but the timeline was greatly exaggerated to when we would actually get the funds. And, they said originally like 6 to 8 weeks or something. And then it's 4 months later and they're still asking me for documents. And at this point we're close to opening.
Right.
And, I just doing some research, I realized that I could take out a line of credit on like retirement accounts, and the interest rate at the time, because we're talking 2021, interest rates were really low. And I just asked a relative who's in finance, and they're like, you should definitely do that. So we ended up telling SBA, like, you know what? No, thank you. Like, I need this money. I needed it last week. And like, you're still, dragging your feet. And they weren't happy about, but we ended up just self-financing that way.
Okay. So I'm curious because you both had good jobs. You're consulting, you're working for this corporation, you're high up the hierarchy at that corporation. I'm assuming you're both in the six-figure land in terms of the revenue.
I wasn't.
Okay. So were you smart about, like, were you putting money away with the intention of someday wanting to go open a restaurant?
We eventually.
Mike has always been smart with money.
Yeah.
I don't think it was necessarily to open a restaurant. It was just to, be smart with money.
I wouldn't say I always was. I think that when you're
Well, from
when
the
you
time
just
you're like 30,
I think that yeah, but I think that when you have like the Ritz paid really well, which looking back it wasn't really that much, but paid a lot more than everywhere else for a line cook. But my mentality at the time was, well, I should buy a better car because I have more money. And then I just kind of lost interest in that stuff eventually.
Yeah, that's consumerism.
Yeah.
It's funny that you lost interest in it in Dallas, which is like the peak of where that exists. We still have the same car we've had for the last
I love that though. That's
11 years, and who cares?
Yeah, and so like when we started making more than we needed for our bills, which was really when we were in Dallas. Again, the pay was great and rent was very cheap, and so we started saving basically and investing, and it was a good time to do it.
This is where it gets personal and weird. So like when you were looking to open a restaurant, like how much money did you think it was going to take? Like, I mean, it was a turnkey operation. You probably just changed the branding a little bit, I would assume.
We did more than we needed to, but it was very turnkey.
So 2021, I'm sure you might have gotten a deal on the rent. Maybe you had some negotiating power at least.
Honestly, that was one of the best things about this is, and again, like I've told you, we've looked at lots of spaces, we continue to, and the lease terms were very favorable, and there's a percentage rent, which I think is the way to go because it's works for everybody. So when we're busy, they make more, and during,
What is that percentage? Do you mind sharing? Like, what is a good way? Well, actually, just get into like, how do you negotiate that type of? I agree with you; it's phenomenal. So, like, how do you get into that?
Honestly, it was very agreeable from the onset. They just wanted access to the space during the day when we were closed.
Okay.
And in exchange,
normally,
for that,
like this store would be open to. Like straight through there is the Francis Hotel.
So
they wanted, just a communal space during the day when we'd be closed. And
as you can tell, that is actually all new.
Okay.
So this used to only be, part of the restaurant, but
Yeah.
we never had any intention of being open for lunch. So that was easy for us to agree to. And the percentage is, I'm pretty sure it's 3%.
Wow.
Plus, a base level that is, rather not say exactly, but it's very agreeable.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think I'm trying to do the mental math right now. But yeah, I think
we pay a lot more in August than we do in April.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
I'm curious, like, do you put a cap on that? Like a percentage up to, if you start like going gain, like how do you, when things are going in your, like when you're doing like huge volume, like then it's not in your favor, right? Because like if you're making, I don't know, like how do you find that balance? Like,
I'm
honestly,
thinking about the question, there's so many variables.
We've looked at so many leases, and I've never seen anything close to being as favorable for the operator. And our experience, unfortunately, has been with most landlords here that they're not as much interested in the success of the operator as they are assigning someone to above market rate.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm doing the math, and like I'm guessing it's ballpark like $3,000 to $5,000 a month, depending on the season, right? So like that seems pretty reasonable. I wouldn't argue with those rates. I mean, I feel like if you go anywhere, if you go downtown, like you're probably looking at $6,000 or $7,000 a month.
Yeah, I think we can't deny that we've been very lucky.
Yeah.
We have a lot of experience, and we've talked a lot about that, but we have been very lucky too.
Right.
We're really lucky to have this space.
But this is a big part. I think it's important to talk about the numbers because we can benchmark and know. And I think a lot of what gets us in trouble is we don't know what a good number is. We go into a deal and we're like, there's no way we're going to make that work. And a lot of that is because the people who own the properties can get a little greedy sometimes. But you also want that situation where the tenant and the landlord have a good relationship, because if it's good for the tenant, then it's good for the landlord.
They don't have to try to find new tenants every year.
Yeah. And again, it's not lost on them that, it wasn't like 3 restaurants in 10 years. It was like 3 restaurants in 3 years.
Right.
So we're not in a happening part of town. Like, this is completely residential. And at night, you go 2 blocks east of here and you start to see a lot more activation. But once you pass that 7-Eleven going this way, it's like dark. Right. So this is a destination restaurant, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like people aren't really wandering in here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and neighborhood.
Yeah.
We are truly in a neighborhood here. And when we first opened, obviously we're in a very touristy town, but having tourists is a great little bump, but that was never the audience that we were going after. We were really making an effort to go after locals.
Yeah, and that's when those relationships are so important. The attention to detail, the seeing people, the remembering people, the doing the unexpected, the unreasonable hospitality, like the book we saw outside.
Making them feel like they're part of something too, and remembering their preferences of which room they like to sit in. We have 3 very distinct rooms in this restaurant. One is a bustling bar that's kind of loud. This is very kind of intimate and quiet back here. And it's like, it's like just kind of collecting all those little data points. And, I
want to get into that because I know you're using Resi to manage that. I'm interested in the details and how you're managing that. But I guess what I'm curious about, so like, you had a good deal on rate on the rent. You're doing 3%. You are putting money aside. You had a 401k from the corporate work you're doing, and you're putting that money aside so you can leverage that to get the loan. Are the ways like, so what was like the number you said you needed to get open?
It changed a lot of times. We did have a GC who was also the same person who built it originally, which was great.
They know what's under the floor when you pull it up.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And particularly the bar was very tricky.
Yeah.
Amazing to work with.
Yeah. And we, had to purchase all the FF&E, front of house. Kitchen came fully equipped, which was, again, something that is very rare.
Right.
And so it added a lot of value to the rent.
What is F&E for somebody who
fixtures, furniture, and equipment.
Got it.
So all of your tables, chairs, light fixtures.
So that was all here?
No, we bought all of it.
No, we bought it all, but it was used because a lot of it was in the previous restaurant.
Got it.
Yeah, the tenant took everything out. We essentially bought everything back.
This couch was custom. This
is brand new.
Yep.
This room changed the most of any of them. We put new paint on the walls, which I think was probably the biggest cosmetic change.
Yeah. But it was the same color as the ceiling. It was like cream color.
Yeah.
Got it.
But so back to your question. Sorry, it fluctuated a lot, but we wanted to not skimp on the branding and not skimp on the little touches like the ones we just talked about. But because there wasn't a ton to do, because we didn't really need to buy any equipment, I think probably, and I had to dip into the line of credit more than once, but I think total between, a little bit of investment from family and personal and the loan was like $150 or something like that.
Okay, that's pretty reasonable.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what you had to come up with on your own, or does that include everything that you got from family?
That's everything. That's
okay.
Yeah, and again, that number kept changing because we didn't really have like a traditional budget in mind because because of the nature of we didn't need kitchen equipment. We didn't need.
We're basically filling in what we did need.
Yeah. So then the biggest expenses were the GC was still the most, and then branding, and then small wares.
Right. I agree 100% with the branding. I think people undervalue that, and especially in today's age where the first thing they're going to see, it won't be the curve appeal. It will be the Google search and like the website. And like if your website looks janky, you're instantly turning people off. So did you do a custom website, or did you go through a platform like Bento Box or Pop Menu?
We use Squarespace, but we paid somebody that knows how to make websites off of, what's the name of it? It's basically like a website you can go to where a lot of different graphic design people or web people, you can hire them.
Was it Fiverr or something like that?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Okay.
No, something else.
There's a bunch out there.
I hired the same woman that we for Roll Call and Wayside. She's based out of Nashville. But
Got it.
Yeah. So, I think that we're happy to spend where we know we are not capable, which is branding and marketing. That we really spend much, but the Instagram, I just didn't have the time to do it. I'm not like savvy with that stuff, and really just allowing myself to put my energy towards the things I am a specialist in, and paying someone to do what they're a specialist in is something that we're big fans of.
100%. Stay in your lane. And I think we are tribal animals. We do better in a tribe because everyone brings something special to the tribe.
Yeah.
There's the forager, the person that knows mushrooms, the person that knows, how to hunt, like come together, stay in your lane, go further together. So what would you recommend budgeting for marketing? I'm curious, the branding alone. What
20
is
to 30,000, I would say, for branding.
Yeah.
Yeah. 20 to 30.
Yeah. It's worth it. Why is it worth it?
God,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you.
I'd say from the get-go, it's almost like therapy for your own business. We have all these thoughts and words and ideas in our own brains, but like we need someone to help us
pull it out.
Just say, here it is, what we're thinking.
Yeah.
And then can you tie it in like a nice package, check it with us, and we're going to say, okay, love that. That's not exactly where we were going with that. Our first call with our the woman super talented that did our branding was 3 hours long, and it was just
basically an interview.
100+ questions about our business.
Yeah. I worked with Miss Details out of Phoenix, Arizona, who was somebody I had on the show because somebody referred her to me. I don't know if you can think of the woman that.
She has a company called Oyay, Oyay.
Okay.
She's based out of Boston.
Awesome. Yeah, doing that. Then the psychology behind marketing too, right? Because you're really pulling on emotions, and having somebody understand who you are, what's at the core of your brand, going through those exercises, pulling that out, working it into your brand, pulling on the emotional decisions the guest is going to make. Like all that takes a lot of time and energy.
Who are you? And
really reverse engineering it.
Yeah. I think it was money well spent, I'd say. And we've both been in situations in restaurants that had identity crisis, and I was like, this will never happen to me if I'm 100% in control, because your team doesn't really know what it is. It's like when there's this mismatch, I just think that you're never going to be able to really tell anyone who you are and what you're here to do and what you set out to do if you don't even really know. So I think it was, I remember working in a restaurant that like one week it was a gastropub, and the next week, and I just died inside when a guest would like ask me to like describe the concept, and like I just want to
distill
be talking about anything else.
Get it out, distill it, keep it cemented, and it's okay to pivot over time. But
totally.
So you guys get open. You figure 150,000. You went a little over that. You said, was that including operating capital for like 6 months or anything like that?
No. I had to keep dipping into that.
So what were the biggest challenges in getting open the first couple of months?
Honestly, getting open was not really that hard because we've done it so many times. Right. It was not losing your mind when there's nobody here, and
staffing was
a big challenge.
2021, it was,
and we're coming from.
Nobody knew who we were here. We don't have any reputation.
In Dallas, we know everybody,
and
here we literally we have no work history here, so no one knows who we are. Nobody cares who we are. So it was very hard.
You really know what we're doing.
Yeah. So when did that start to change? You said you did 800,000 in the first year, 1.2 million in the second year. That's almost $500,000 in revenue in a year, right? Like when did the gears start to shift? Like it sounds like you were in first gear for a while.
Well, I got to give Siobhán a lot of the credit here. Is like the every guest every time mentality started from day one, and so we made minor improvements. Like we added some acoustic panels in the next room because we got frequent complaints that it was too loud, but it was really just hammering home that nobody leaves here unhappy. And just really it's exhausting and it's hard. And, but that was really it. I mean, being consistent with the food, obviously.
What kind of food are you doing here?
It's very European inspired. I feel like it fits really well with the space. Like it's
kind of an Italian, French,
meets New England,
meets London.
How many items on the menu?
15 to 20, something like that.
Yeah. Pretty reasonable. How often does that change?
Not that often. We change our vegetable dishes seasonally, but we want people to be able to come here and have that dish that they love, and then we run features.
Right. Why is that better than, say, a rotating menu every week?
2 reasons. One, like I said, it's just we want people to be like, I love that dish there, and that is something that happens a lot. But also, I feel like changing the menu constantly. I don't like to eat at places like that generally because I feel like they're not fine-tuned enough usually. And
you get a lot of 6, 7 out of 10s, whereas, I think Mike's approach is change the menu less, but always be improving on all the dishes. So the dishes don't just, minor tweaks to, sitting down and eating the food how a guest would in the restaurant, leads you to say, this needs a little bit of more this in the sauce. But really fine-tuning the dishes that have remained on our menu rather than scrapping it and starting new all the time.
Yeah, and I did say, why is that better than, say, like a prefix, like changing menu or whatever? Like, why is that better for you? I think is the important thing, because for some scenarios, like that might not be better, right?
You mean from an operation standpoint?
For an operation standpoint, but I think from a profit, like if I want to be profitable, I think it depends. It all depends, honestly. Like there are no 2 restaurants that are exactly the same.
Exactly, yeah. And again, we're pretty locked in the back of house here right now, but we basically, eliminate waste in a way that your guests aren't going to feel like you're serving them something that was trim of something else. And so, like one thing we do here, we always have pork schnitzel on the menu, and pork, when you get a loin, unlike beef where it's separated into the ribeye and then the strip loin, it's one piece that has like what would be the ribeye on one end, and then as it gets towards the sirloin, it becomes just the eye of the loin itself, and the ribeye end you have to trim away. The eye of the loin's like that big, and you have to trim away so much. So what we do is we cut off the first third and we dry age them, and we turn the rest into schnitzel. And then when we accumulate enough of these, then we run like what we call pork ribeye.
Okay.
And it's already paid for by the schnitzel. It doesn't see it. It actually is like gets people really excited. But it's something, it's pretty unique that really is a byproduct, but doesn't feel at all like a byproduct.
Yeah. I mean, that's getting to that point where that's the other thing you get with consistency is you get to see like there's consistent byproduct. And then you get to like figure out like how can I use this to the point where we can treat it like a byproduct, or we can treat it like the main show, and have run a special, and that special is going to bring people in. Like I think when you have patterns and routine, it helps you really ring out. Unless you're like an Alinea, where your whole brand is built on something new, but I don't think every restaurant can operate like that.
No, and it's such a small fraction. And I do think restaurants at that level, they do go through the R&D and the constructive criticism at the highest level, but like they can afford to just work on a dish for 2 weeks. And but for the typical restaurant, like if you took even just exactly this restaurant,
neighborhood bistro,
tavern. Where you've got a 3-man line and you're doing 50 to 120 covers a night, to change the menu frequently, it really is a lot of time to fine tune those things in the way that Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The mistakes you're going to make when you have a new item on the menu,
Yeah.
waste goes up. Everything literally goes up.
Yeah.
And don't get us wrong. I mean, consumers love, very creative restaurants that are changing up their menu all the time. And I think people seek out a lot of restaurants that are doing that. Again, I think it's a way that, not that we wanted to be different from that, but it's just a little bit more, I don't know, how we operate to be consistent and, that super attention to detail where we never want our guests to be like a guinea pig for a dish. It's like that we whipped up yesterday for the first time and now they're paying for it the next day. It's like we want to make sure we've on the 8th iteration before somebody's paying for it.
Right.
And so that's just our process. I don't think there's any right way. I think that people get really excited about restaurants that change up their menu all the time. And then I think there's people that, use us as like their kind of homey go-to. Oh, I can go have that eggplant dish that I love so much. And, I know that they're going to have it on their menu.
Right. So, I mean, we started this conversation by, it's really that easy, but that hard. And it's that consistency of doing the right thing, taking care of your people, seeing each individual guest and caring for them and bringing them back. And over time, it was kind of like you guys slowly turned up you opened the valve and people just started coming in faster and faster. Is that kind of what happened here? I mean, that's what the numbers suggest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been all very word of mouth, honestly. I think that we're still kind of under the radar in a funny way. You tell that to somebody that dines here once a week, they're like, you're crazy, you're just being humble. I'm like, no, I meet people in town, at the gym where I'm like, oh yeah, what do you do for work? Oh, I own a restaurant called Wayside Tavern. I could
like, where is that?
I've
There's
never
also
heard
so
of that
many
before.
restaurants. You kind of get lost
I know
in the sea.
there's so many
Yeah.
restaurants, but it's also not New York City. Like
Right.
sometimes I'm still like, I'm not offended.
Well, it's only
It's
been
just,
a
it's
good
just
year.
interesting.
actually.
I see it as an opportunity. Like,
Yeah.
oh, cool, we haven't maxed out in this market because
Right.
there's still so many people that either don't know about us or have never come in, and we have kind of flown under the radar a little bit, and
Right.
just grown kind of by word of mouth, piece by piece.
I mean, right now I'm on Google. You have a 4.8 out of 5, which is hard to do. That's out of 161 reviews. Do you entice these reviews? Are these all organic?
No.
Absolutely
reviews?
not. They're all organic, but we take great pride.
You should. I mean, 4.8 is not easy to do in today's
Yeah.
market. Like you look at somebody wrong, you can get like if the parking is bad one night.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's your restaurant's fault.
It goes back to if somebody feels cared for, they're probably not going to leave you a terrible review.
We get some good reviews from people who we messed something up or they didn't like something.
Because it gives you an opportunity to really showcase your skills in hospitality if there's been a mistake and we're coming from negative. If everything's just
think it was
firing in all cylinders and easy breezy all the time, everyone's like, I love Wayside Tavern. It shouldn't be that challenging. But we're challenged when things don't go right.
I think when people see your level of give and F, like I love to use the analogy of a dog. We love dogs. Why do we love dogs? Because they love us.
Yeah.
You know, like you could be like, you come home, your dog is so every freaking time you could go to your car to get like a bag and come back in. Your dog's like, you didn't leave.
You're here.
Yeah. Like, you're welcome back. You know, like wiggling its ass so hard that its whole body shakes and like turning into you and smiling almost, right? Like when we see that, like when you give that level of I see you so much that I can't contain it, like people, even if you piss or shit on the floor by accident, like you'll be forgiven.
Which has happened.
Yeah. Like and I hate to be crude, but like, you know, like it's like that intensity, that level of love when you love people and you see them and you care for them like a dog does when you roll over on your belly and expose your vulnerabilities because you know like that love, that's how you build trust.
And I think everyone wins in that scenario too.
Yeah.
You know, it feels good for us and for our team to be able to say yes and have that be the culture. To be able to not be afraid to go to the kitchen and say, hey, can we do this with, out the mushrooms or something, some modification. We just have a no ego policy here from everyone from, the dishwasher to Mike and I and everyone in between. And this is something I was thinking about the other night is like, hospitality is not just something that the front of house does here. It's something that the back of house very much takes an active role in. because it's hospitable of our chef and our kitchen team to say, sure, yeah, I'll do that.
How do you create that culture?
Hire the right people for starters. Our chef is when she did her stage here, she stayed till the very end of the night and she made a family meal for everybody. I'm like, all right, that's the kind of person we want running the kitchen.
Hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, especially when there's not a lot of people in the market to hire.
I mean,
we've rolled up our sleeves and filled those roles.
This is the first time ever in 3.5 years we've had a fully staffed back of house.
What was the struggle with getting to that point? How did you overcome it?
Well, the struggle was there were way more job openings than there were people who wanted to work in kitchens. And
to get someone to show up for an interview, it was like, oh my God, they're here.
The reality was I just did it. Like, I was a cook here for over 2 years.
Yeah.
A lot of, there's serious wage inflation because of this. And we knew we couldn't afford to do that. And especially at that point, I'm going to be here anyways. And so we just ran with a smaller team and just kind of waited it out.
Very small, but very strong team.
Yeah.
At all times of us being open. Some really key players. Our opening chef, we owe so much to him. Our opening sous chef, neither are with us anymore. One moved back to his hometown of Chicago. We have Aaron on board now for about the last year and a half. And, just, top-notch people.
So getting them here is hard.
Yes.
Keeping them is harder. What do you do to keep your staff? What are the things that you think you do that's unique that...
I think that a lot of... I think, I don't have any data on this, but I don't think there's a lot of restaurants that are right in the 1 to 1.5 million in revenue that offer group health insurance. And that's important to people.
How do you make that happen?
We couldn't for the first 2 years.
Yeah,
we were able to afford it after 2 years.
What was that threshold of when you could afford it? How do you know you can afford it?
Probably just seeing what's left over after, for the first, I don't really remember exactly how long it was, but months and months, Mike and I didn't pay ourselves anything. Of course, you could pay your people, and then if there's anything left, it's like, okay, we get a little something. And we were ready for that. Slowly but surely, I think, your vendors are paid, your people are paid. We still, oh my God, we have a little left over. What are we going to put that towards? What were you going to say?
No, exactly that. We just got to a point where we could afford it. I mean, I like numbers. I like to geek out about this stuff. And so it wasn't, we know where we're at all the time. And a big part of it was we were able to pay off that loan in probably a year and a half.
Wow. That's huge. So was most of your profit at that time just going towards debt?
Yeah.
What could we talk about prime costs? Like, what are your labor and cost of goods? Where do you fall there?
Cost of goods were pretty traditional. Food cost is, high 20s usually. Liquor's a little higher here because of the way Maine.
There's not a lot of wholesale discounts at all.
We pay the same as any consumer would at a liquor store.
Got it.
So you have to factor that in, and rather than have $20 cocktails, we just kind of take a hit, but we're able to get...
Wine is about high 20s, 30.
Yeah. Blended COGS probably 30.
Okay. So blended cost of goods, including alcohol, you're at about 30%.
Yeah.
And then what about labor costs?
High.
Yeah.
Right now, it wasn't for a while because we didn't have anyone... I mean, obviously, the tipped employees... Yeah, the tipped employees make less per hour. But right now, it's...
35?
Oh, no.
40?
If you factor in health insurance, it's probably 45.
Okay. So that puts you at about 75, 3% rent, right? So
3% plus there's a base as well.
So you factor in your insurance with the labor costs.
Yeah, that's where it hits on our P&L. Yeah.
Got it. How much of that profit were you putting away? What percentage of profit were you putting away to pay off that debt?
God, I don't even remember. It was like several $100s a week.
Okay.
And then if we had a really good week, I would just make an extra payment.
If you cover your own liabilities, anything left over, getting rid of debt.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
We try to stay very far ahead on our vendors. Anyone who owed money to any of their vendors when COVID hit was completely screwed. And I remember listening to a podcast about that. Just like, so we act like we're COD. Like every day I'm paying vendors, and I don't want to owe anyone anything.
Right.
And so that makes it easier, because if I do have to, I'm not going to pay this person this week because had a slow week or whatever, it's not the end of the world. And I know, okay, we've got 3 large parties next week that are, a few grand a piece, we'll get back on track.
Yeah. Anything we haven't discussed in terms of challenges, advice, things you think you did right that hasn't come out of today's conversation that we need to know about?
I think that, one thing that part of the guest experience is, Siobhán kind of hinted at it, but there's a lot of rules in restaurants these days. We need your whole order. Things will come out whenever we feel like it. And we really make a point to not do that.
And I think COVID really upped that, and there had to be.
Well, there had to be rules.
There had to be
regulation,
rules.
Right?
Right.
There had to be rules. We really, I think, opening still with, people really having this sensitivity, and then that was another thing when the time that we opened, it's everybody had a different sensitivity level to COVID, how comfortable they were going into restaurants, and you kind of just had to meet people where they're at. I mean, this is a small, tables are close together in this restaurant. There's no way around it. By the time we opened, there was no 6 feet mandate or anything like that, but you still want to make sure people feel comfortable. But also I think that we had a unique opportunity at the time to invite people into a space that was a pre-COVID restaurant, while still being safe and respectful. We wore masks for the first year, maybe. While still...
We're going to have some background noise.
That's all right. We're in a restaurant. My listeners are conditioned.
Just giving people that sense of, community and feeling like they could kind of forget about all the stress that COVID brought, and they could come into this neighborhood restaurant and shed a little bit of that and get back to, being together in a space, and service being more pre-COVID and warm, and there being less rules and restrictions around. We never would put a sign up to say, please be nice to our staff, we're understaffed. It's most people are nice to your staff.
Right.
And if you have one asshole, deal with that one asshole. Don't make everybody feel like they're an asshole before they walk in, and kind of put people on this defense.
It's a real turnoff for it. We obviously dine out a lot, and just when the first thing that happens when you sit down is you're given a bunch of rules, it's this is not hospitable.
It's not fun.
Right.
We want a restaurant to be fun. We want people to just
Have you been here before? Do you know how to use our menu? Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah.
And it's if you just want to make no decisions, we got you. We just want it to be really relaxing and fun and enjoyable, and you can enjoy your company and the reason why you're here.
I would like to know about your tech stack. So you already mentioned you're using Resi for consumer reservations, front of house.
We
Toast?
use
Toast.
Anything else in terms of
No.
Not really. We use Toast for payroll.
Okay. So why did you choose Toast?
It's super user friendly. It's really easy on the back end. You can make a adjustment to something on the POS and it changes immediately. It's really easy to use.
Are you using the tablet, or are you using just the
We have
station?
one tablet, but we mostly use the
Monitor?
Yeah, monitor POS. I think the tablet is great in casual settings. I don't love it in more, if we even call ourselves, we kind of blend the worlds here. But I don't love people using it at the tables here. It's just a personal preference.
Gotcha.
Especially for payment.
But I kind of love it as a guest in a more casual environment that I'm ooh, I know my order is in.
Right. It depends. Are you paying for convenience and high turn? Is it a bustling area?
Yeah, love it at Eventide,
right.
And yeah, it doesn't seem like it fits here.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. Back to there is no one way. There is no one way. It all depends. There's so many different. No two restaurants are exactly the same.
Right.
There's so many variables. Are you using any like back office software like QuickBooks or like inventory management?
QuickBooks. Yeah.
Okay. What about like inventory or like accounts receivable, payable, stuff like that?
No, I just do it a very disorganized.
Inventory?
We do have an accountant,
Okay.
which I would also suggest people get.
100%.
Yeah.
Marketing, accounting, outsource.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Legal.
we do wine inventory because we have a pretty big list and a lot of wine on hand, but the food like is very easy to know what we have.
Gotcha. You have 15 items on the menu.
Yeah, and plus we're cash based, so like it's not like you're getting a credit towards food costs at the end of the month because your inventory, like it's, what you spent is what food cost is.
Got it. Back to reservations. Lots of options there. You could have, at the time of opening, you could have gone with Open Table. You could have gone with Resi. You could have gone with Talk. Talk is now Resi. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
I know American Express.
American
bought
Express,
both,
Resi, then Resi and Talk, or Resi and American Express bought Talk most recently. Why Resi?
So it was really, I think, in my experience, I've used Resi and Open Table. I don't have much experience with Talk, except for kind of an event based at the time, years and years ago.
Right.
But I think that, cost Resi is a lot cheaper than Open Table.
Right.
And you can tell that it was designed by restaurant people. And it's
what our comp set uses, so we like to be able to.
It's more intuitive in general, I think. I just like some of the features on there. But again, I mean, Resi making you pay for every reservation, Open Table, and different varying degrees based on how they booked. I thought it was easier to use and a lot cheaper.
Right. You're using a lot of the features, the CRM, the customer relationship management features, where you're entering data. What majority of your guests would you say are regulars? What, like in terms of like profit, would you say it's like a 90-10 split, where like 90% of your revenue comes from like reoccurring guests?
Depends on the season.
That high, but it is high. We have a lot of regulars here. What would you say?
50-50?
I mean, in the summer?
Not in the summer, but
what about off-peak season? Like
it increases.
Like
it
January
increases.
through April.
I'd say more like
80-20, 70-30?
70-30 probably.
Yeah.
70% being
Local
recurring revenue. So would you say you have like data in your system on like the majority of your guests?
Yeah.
And how are you using those features to track this data to be able to hit hard, to remember that these little details that leave people kind of really feeling seen?
Yeah, I think putting notes in the moment when somebody's there, like the second that, we never want somebody that's dined here 20 times, that has drank Pellegrino 20 times on their 21st visit, that someone pours them still water. I'm like,
Right.
It drives me crazy. So, making notes in the moment, we're always, empowering our team to make sure that they're putting in notes about their table's preferences. Just anything from people, not wanting their plates to be swapped out in between courses, or I think that most people that use Resi from a consumer standpoint don't really know about this feature. They know that they can put in if they have an allergy or something like that, but I don't know why every restaurant wouldn't use this to the max, because you almost people think it's like magic that you remember that they love this room or this table, or
the last time they were celebrating like a special event. Like how did that go? Like little details like that.
Yeah, and we try to, I think too, human nature, if somebody takes the time to put in their reservation that they're celebrating something special, that in itself means that they want that to be acknowledged.
Right.
They already acknowledged it themselves, and they want that to be acknowledged, and that's important to them. And and we like to, Resi will keep track of how many visits people have had, and
this is where I feel like people confuse when we think of culture. Like you've heard the saying, like culture eats systems and processes for dinner. or like whatever. But like I think that people like I see those two things as being exactly the same. Like systems is culture. Systems are the things you do ritualistically every day that you have to do to maintain your culture. So like I guess what I'm curious about, like I feel like this is a culture to train your staff to care, to see, to value, but you have to build systems around that to make sure that people are actually getting into the system, like the data.
Yeah,
to
but they know how to do it.
to to go get it, and then to also enter it in. So like, is it during the pre-mail where you're like, are you going through all those notes in the pre-mail, or are you saying, hey, like here, go ahead?
Yeah, anything that has like something that should be mentioned. We'll always talk about any regulars or VIPs that are coming in, and then any particular, even if somebody's only been in twice, but they have kind of an unusual note, like we'll always make sure to mention that. And we have, sometimes the game plan at the beginning of the night as far as where somebody's going to sit can change. And so we'll then make sure to follow up with whoever ends up getting that table. And just to remind somebody in the heat of service, hey, that's, the table that prefers to not have their plate swapped out, or they just kind of keep to themselves.
So like the hot items that like, or you're aware of, the regulars, like that kind of stuff, you'll resurface, like a make it or break it thing. But other than that, like, are they trained to go in there before they approach the table to like check the names and stuff like that?
They are. And with these things, even with the best staff, you still have to, you just have to always keep it in the forefront of their minds, like, making sure. I think it's always good to have that safety net. I'm usually working the door during service, so I'll usually remind people like, hey, you probably saw, but that's a birthday, or hey, that's a nut allergy.
What is one feature with Resi that you think most operators do not take advantage of that you do? That's a curveball.
I mean, honestly, I think that it is hard to keep up with the notes because you're really relying on your team. Again, you can't have this culture all by yourself. I think, and even for us, we're not doing it perfectly. I think just kind of always keeping your finger on the pulse of that and using that feature to the max. Like we're not doing it to the max. We can always improve in that regard. I would honestly say that I can't think of another. I mean, I don't know if everyone knows this, but you can have 24/7 support for Resi, and it's just a little drop-down box on the top left, and you hit support, and there's somebody, a real person, that can help you with any issue you're having. And I use that all the time.
Yeah.
Super helpful.
Yeah. The time now is almost 10 past the hour. We agreed to. So I do want to respect your time and start to wrap it up. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot by saying this. So before we got started, I mean, you addressed the fact that it's a tough time for Portland right now. A lot of restaurants are closing, and you're hesitant about getting into the number because of the nature of like the people are closing and you're doing well, and that feels weird. So first and foremost, I want to acknowledge you and thank you for being willing to talk about these things. I think that by talking about these things, we can help other restaurants from closing. But like, do you want to talk to what's happening on a bigger like macro level within restaurants? Why you think these restaurants are closing, and what we can do within the industry to like, if the mission statement is to change the world through inspiring and empowering the restaurant industry, like in this moment, how do we empower the industry to make positive change?
Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of things to consider. I think that some of the restaurants that closed just weren't prepared for, the business side and maybe borrowed too much money and the revenue wasn't there. I think a lot of the older ones that have been around a while, which is that's much more rare to see that. But I think it's just a lot of the operators, not wanting to deal with a new stress. Like they probably were over the hump of like, okay, they're making money, things are going good. Then all of a sudden COVID hits, and now, your dishwasher that was $12 an hour before COVID, now it's 18 to 20. Line cooks are, I don't even know what the going rate is, but it's much higher than it used to be, and that just creates like a whole new, like you have to reimagine your whole business. And I think that a lot of the restaurateurs who are thought they were over that they'd done that already. We're just like, I just, I'm going to hang it up.
Yeah, it's constantly evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that the wage inflation and the lack of supply on the back of house side is really
Cost of goods going up,
goods.
but also how
Inflation
quickly
all around, yeah.
all of that happened. It's not like that happened over a 3-year span. It happened in
A
the
year,
blink
6
of-
months.
Yeah. Restaurants reopened, and all of a sudden you have to pay hazard pay, and you have,
Right.
and don't get me wrong, even if all these people want to pay these higher wages, doesn't mean your business can survive you doing
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you were hanging on by a thread before the pandemic, for whatever reason, the pandemic was a samurai sword. to that
Yeah.
time. It's just
Exactly.
gone.
Yeah.
Is there any other like bigger issue that's like beyond the restaurant industry's control that you think could change?
We definitely don't have enough time to talk about it. And I'm definitely not going to come up with a solution. But the pay disparity between back and front of house, and if this idea that both of our presidential candidates had about eliminating income tax for tipped employees is going to make it even worse. And it's like, what motivation is there to go cook then?
Right.
It's, and that's something that I feel like as long as I've been in this industry, it's been an issue, and no one has come up with a good solution. Even Danny Meyer, he eliminated tipping and then brought it right back.
I mean, I think I point to the consumer. I think when I say the restaurant industry has the power to change the world, I think that we don't recognize our influence when we are literally so close to the most human thing that there is. And I think that thing is food. Food has shaped humanity for as long as humanity has been a thing. And I think we forget that we have this influence because we're close to food, and I think we can influence the consumer to make different purchasing decisions. But I think it takes us all doing it together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my thought. I don't mean to
Yeah.
put words into your mouth, but I mean, that's part of what I'm trying to
The
do
all
here.
doing it together is
Well, I think that's why it's important that we start talking and sharing
Yeah.
information and getting real about the numbers and sharing people who are doing it well and what that looks like. So, we got to stop looking at the people down the street as competition and start looking at them as we have to do this together. Like Danny Meyer, back to Danny Meyer, all ships rise with the tide.
yeah.
So thank you for taking the time to do that. I do want to ask a couple closing questions before we officially wrap up, and we'll be out of here. And thank you for your patience going over too. I appreciate that. One thing about your business. What's one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's uncommon and makes you truly unstoppable?
I think that one thing we do that we learned back in Dallas is that we regularly have a full guest experience, and not just like a bite of a dish or, through the lens of like whatever position you're working that day, but actually like we're going to exit the building, we're going to come in the building, we're going to look at the lights, the music, we're going to evaluate the service, time between courses, portion size, all these things that you really cannot evaluate unless you actually do that. And it was something that we
We were
both
forced to do
yeah.
at other
we
jobs
both
we've
we
had.
both learned for the company. We worked in Dallas. A guy named Tristan Simon, who's been a mentor to both of us, and it was the most eye-opening thing since like when I started at the Ritz.
That was Tristan Simon. I'm making
Tristan Simon, yeah.
Okay, well, the mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. How have you personally transformed? How are you better operators today than when you started in this work, or since you opened your restaurant?
I mean, I think that we've both been mentors for a lot of people underneath us throughout the years. We have a very different kind of skill set, but I mean, I know I can speak to Mike being a huge mentor for many sous chefs that worked below him, and they've all gone to be having a ton of success in their own careers and being able to support their families and really taking, the things that he taught them and the hard work on their end. We were saying being a sous chef has got to be one of the hardest jobs in the restaurant industry. It's like
hardest work for the least amount of money.
Yeah, and if you can get through that period, and we've seen so many people do it that have worked under Mike, and just taking those things that he instilled in them and having very successful careers now. And, you know, I came up as a, you know, younger woman manager, and I think I've shown some, you know, a lot of women that I've worked with that, you know, you can have a seat at the table. And I do it in my own way. You know, I was also fortunate to work with a couple of companies that had very strong female leadership. But I think learning to do it in your own way, it's never going to work if you try to mimic somebody else. It's never going to be organic. And just seeing that if you don't have anything to say, it's okay to not say anything that day, and, you know, speak up when you have something important. It's like, that's okay too. I think a lot of women in this industry feel like, if I got to compete with the men, I got to like be a man. It's like, no, you don't. You just be a confident woman. That's okay too. And I hope this podcast has inspired more women to step into that role. I've had a lot of leaders on the show who are women, so I think there is opportunity in this space for women. I hope they feel like there is. I think it's changed so much in the last 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, just in the past couple of weeks, I think the majority of my guests have been women. You know, so I think there's positive things happening in this space for women. Yeah. So happy to share my platform to get the word out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Do you want to add anything to what she said in terms of transformation?
For me personally, it's just the older I get, the more empathetic I become, and it's partially because I feel like it's a maturity thing, but partially also because that perfect cook that I used to look for when I was younger, just, you know, they're not going to come walking through the door, and somebody comes in with a good attitude and is willing to learn.
Show up to their interview.
You know, they show up to their interview, then, you know, that's...
they want to be here. They want to learn.
Yeah, that's more important than where they worked or their knife skills or...
Gotcha.
Plus, we sous vide the steak, so you can't screw it up.
Higher than 51%. A lot of Denny Meyer references today.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is the last question. Did you guys take notes on this last question? Because it's a doozy. Do you have the same notes?
I think so.
I don't know how you want to. I don't know how you want to tackle it. But the question is, if you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of your work in your restaurants would be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be? I don't know if you want to each give me 3, or if you want to tag team this one.
I don't know if we agreed on 3, so there might be 4.
All right, give us 4.
Mine were be kind and generous.
1.
Don't be afraid to fail.
2.
And then Siobhan's big one was be on time.
You're making me sound like I'm...
3. That's a big one. Half the battle showing up.
I had another good one. I didn't.
What's the 4th one?
You didn't write it down. You weren't prepared.
Shoot from the hip. Trust your gut.
Yeah, I think just being generous and kind and leading by example.
What you give, you get.
Yeah, lead by example and
I love
be
this.
a good role model.
This has been a lot of fun, folks. Thank you so much. I like to wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. That's how I found you. This is really my North Star. I think word of mouth is still the most powerful way to find things and to make an example of people. So who's doing it right? Whether that's here in Maine or in New England or across the country, who do you respect, admire, who's running their businesses well, who is fiscally responsible? Who's that for you?
We worked with an amazing woman named Nicole McClendon in Dallas, and she, just a short period of time after we opened Wayside, she opened a coffee shop in Richardson, Texas. That's just kind of part of North Dallas, called Staycation. And she's just one of the most thoughtful,
emotionally intelligent,
people I've ever met. She creates just culture like it's easy to do. She's always got a great team around her. She's so patient and but it also just, you know, has so much integrity, and we miss her and we miss working with her, and we think that you would have a lot of fun talking to her.
Nicole, look out, I'm coming after you. Any other names you want to drop on me?
Oh, well,
I think
we're allowed to drop more. We were going back and forth because we obviously have a lot of friends that have, you know, followed a similar path. But while you're in Portland, you should check out Ilma and Damien from Cheval and Ugly Duckling.
I'm talking to her right now. So you are the second person to reinforce that. Hopefully Friday we'll make that happen.
No one, I mean, the name of your podcast is Unstoppable. That woman is
She's a
unstoppable.
hustler.
Look out.
We love her.
I'm coming after you. I'd love to get you on the show. And this is where I let you, how do we connect? If there's a way to connect, now is when I let you share that information.
We are on Instagram, Wayside Tavern.
Email?
Yeah. Email info@waysidetavernmaine.com.
Got it.
That will go directly to me.
Perfect. This is episode 1142. So if we mention any tools or services, we reference a couple old episodes, Predictive Index, Resi. Any of those notes will be in the show notes with links back. Just scroll down whatever player, Spotify, iTunes will be right there. And this is where I say thank you so much. I literally cannot do what I do without people like you letting me come into their restaurant and ask a bunch of personal questions you're not supposed to ask people, but I think it's in opening up and getting vulnerable that we are going to make the impact we need.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for
It was
having
nice
us. Thank
chatting.
Pleasure is mine. Cheers.